Close your eyes for a moment and listen, not to the hum of your laptop or the digital chirp of your phone, but to a sound you haven't heard in 30 years. It's a rhythmic, mechanical whir-click, followed by a metallic sliding noise. In the late 90s, that sound was the heartbeat of every birthday party and vacation. We spent our lives capturing moments on a physical medium we couldn't even see until a week later. But there was a specific hidden danger to this ritual, a mistake you could make in a split second that would wipe your entire summer vacation from existence. Most of us have forgotten that anxiety, just as we've forgotten the heavy, tactile world we used to inhabit. We didn't notice these things leaving. They didn't go out with a bang, they just drifted away. But while the film canister was our window to the world, there was something else sitting right in the middle of our kitchen counters that held a much more permanent kind of power over our daily lives. Before the internet was a utility, it was a physical object. It was 3 inches thick, printed on paper so thin it felt like dried onion skin, and it arrived on your doorstep like a mysterious gift from the city. But the phone book wasn't just a directory, it was a social hierarchy. There was a secret group of people in your neighbourhood who possessed something everyone else wanted, but you had to pay a monthly ransom to achieve it. If you didn't, your home address and private number were public property, available to any stranger with a finger and a sense of curiosity. Remember the smell of those pages? That distinct, ink-heavy scent that rubbed off on your fingertips? You'd run your nail down the white pages, squinting at the tiny font, looking for a friend's name. We used these books as booster seats for children at Thanksgiving. We tore them in half to prove our strength. It was the physical manifestation of our community. That ransom was, of course, the unlisted number, a luxury of privacy we now take for granted. We stopped needing the book when the search bar replaced the index. But while the phone book was public, there was a tiny, jagged piece of metal we all carried in our pockets that felt much more personal, until it started disappearing from the very machines it was meant to operate. There was a specific mechanical soul to starting a car that has been replaced by a soulless plastic button.
There was a specific mechanical soul to starting a car that has been replaced by a soulless plastic button. But there was a hidden ritual to the metal key, a sweet spot. If you didn't jiggle the key just right, the car simply wouldn't acknowledge you. Think of the weight of a keychain in 1992. It was a heavy, jingling mass of brass and silver. The coldness of the metal against your thigh through your pocket. The sound of it hitting the catch-all bowl by the front door. A sharp, musical clink. There was a ceremony to it, sliding the key into the ignition, feeling the tumblers click into place, and the resistance of the spring as you turned it to start. We traded that tactile connection for the convenience of the fob, and in doing so, we lost the physical handshake between human and machine. But as we moved away from metal keys, we also moved away from a specific type of glass, a giant glowing box in our living rooms that emitted a strange static energy that could actually change the hair on your arms. If you grew up with a tube TV, you remember the invisible force field. If you put your hand near the screen, the static electricity would pull at your skin. But there was a darker side, a high-pitched whine that only children could hear, a frequency that signalled the TV was warm, and a strange smell of ozone that suggested something inside was hovering just below the point of combustion. These weren't just screens, they were furniture. They were heavy, deep, and finished in faux oak. You didn't click through channels, you clunked through them with a heavy plastic dial. To get a clear picture, you had to perform aerial ballet, twisting rabbit ears draped in crumpled aluminium foil. The CRT died because it was too big to keep up with our hunger for pixels. But while we were staring at those glowing boxes, we were often ignoring a small circular tray sitting on the coffee table, an object that represented a habit so pervasive it was once considered healthy to do in hospital.
In the 1980s, the world smelled different. There was a constant blue-grey haze in every McDonald's, every library, and every aeroplane. But there was one specific place the ashtray lived that felt the most wrong by today's standards, a place where children were meant to be safe and sleeping. The ashtray was the ultimate invisible object. They were built into the armrests of cars and the backs of aeroplane seats. They were heavy glass rounds in every living room. There was a specific sound, the tink of a glass rim, and the sight of a flickering orange ember in a dim room. It was a social anchor. Social shifts and health realizations pushed the ashtray into the junk bin of history, cleaning our air, but removing a certain nocturnal aesthetic from our spaces. But as the smoke cleared, we realized we were also losing something much louder, a mechanical scream that used to erupt from our hallways every time someone wanted to speak to us. The rotary phone came with a physical limitation that dictated exactly where you had to stand to use it. Many people didn't realize this limitation was actually a social filter. It meant your parents knew exactly who you were talking to because you were tethered to the wall in the busiest room of the house. The sound of a rotary phone is unmistakable. The zip, zip, zip of the dial returning to its home position. The weight of the receiver. It felt like a weapon, solid and unbreakable. And the cord? That long, coiled plastic tail that would inevitably become a knotted, tangled mess that you'd spend hours mindlessly unlooping while gossiping. We traded the tether for the freedom of the cell phone, but we lost the intentionality of a phone call. However, even as we moved toward digital communication, we were still holding on to a physical way to save our memories, using a thin brown ribbon of plastic that was notoriously prone to bleeding.
There was a social contract associated with the VHS tape. If you broke it, you were a pariah. But there was also a physical ghost inside the tape, a phenomenon called tracking, where the image would melt and distort, requiring you to manually fight the machine to see the movie. The VHS was a sensory masterpiece. The clunk-shh of the player swallowing the tape, the smell of the black plastic case, the grainy, warm flicker of the FBI warning at the start, and, of course, the ritual of the rewind, the high-pitched mechanical squeal as the movie raced backwards to its beginning. Streaming killed the VHS, but it also killed the patience of the viewer. But even before the VHS was gone, something else was disappearing from our cars. A small, glowing orange coil that could reach temperatures of 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit, sitting right next to the radio.
It was a standard feature in every vehicle for 70 years, yet it was arguably the most dangerous object in the interior. It was a literal open heating element that could burn a hole through a seat or a finger in seconds. Remember the wait? You'd push it in and you'd have to sit there for 10 seconds, listening for that distinctive pop. When it emerged, it carried a specific scent, burning dust and hot metal. It was a masterpiece of simple engineering, a bimetallic strip that expanded when hot to release the spring. Today, those ports are 12-volt power outlets, usually covered by a plastic cap, used for chargers rather than embers. But while we were losing the fire in our cars, we were also losing the paper in our pockets, specifically the giant folding puzzles that used to cause arguments in the passenger seat.
There is a legend that no human being has ever successfully folded a road map back into its original form on the first try. But the map represented something more than directions. It represented possibility. If you lost your place on the map, you were truly, terrifyingly lost. The feel of that crisp, thin paper, the way the blue lines for rivers and red lines for highways created a beautiful, chaotic web. You had to develop a specific skill, reading a map upside down while driving, or navigating by the position of the sun.
It was an active participation in the journey. GPS turned us into passive followers of a blue dot, killing the geographic instinct we once had. But even more vital than the map was the voice of the street, a silver and blue box on the corner that required a very specific piece of pocket change to operate. There was a specific type of anxiety known only to the pre-cellphone era, being stranded and realizing you didn't have a quarter. But there was also a secret language to the payphone, the collect call trick, where you'd say your message in the state your name prompt to avoid paying. The payphone was a sensory experience. The cold, heavy metal of the receiver, the smell of stale tobacco and city rain inside the booth, the sound of the coin dropping through the internal maze, ding, ding, clunk. It was a portal to home, a lifeline in the middle of a vast, disconnected world. The payphone didn't just disappear, it was ripped out, leaving behind ghost footprints on the sidewalks, metal plates where the booths once stood. But while we were losing our public voices, we were also losing a specific type of shimmer in our pockets, the sound of 35 silver discs rattling in a yellow plastic box.
Inside that little black cylinder was a roll of memories. But if you opened the back of your camera at the wrong time, a single leak of light would incinerate those memories instantly. You were carrying around a volatile, chemical secret that you wouldn't understand until it was processed. The canister itself was a masterpiece of utility. The satisfying pop of the grey lid, the smell of the chemicals inside, sharp and vinegar-like. After the film was gone, we used those canisters to hold quarters for the laundromat or to hide emergency cash. They were the ultimate multi-purpose container of the 20th century. Digital photography made the canister obsolete, and with it, the wait for the photo. But as we stopped waiting for photos, we also stopped waiting for the morning news, specifically the physical thump of a bundle of paper hitting our front porch. The newspaper was the heartbeat of the morning, but it came with a specific hazard. If the delivery boy had a bad aim, your news ended up in the bushes, or worse, the birdbath. But there was a hidden art to the newspaper, the Sunday fold, that required the precision of an architect to master. The sound of the rubber band snapping, the black ink that would inevitably stain your fingers as you read the funnies, the way the paper felt, cold and slightly damp from the morning dew. It was the only time of day the world felt quiet and informed at the same time. The 24-hour news cycle turned the paper into yesterday's news before it even hit the grass. But while the newspaper gave us the world, there was one final object that gave us control. A small sliding piece of plastic on our floppy disks that could lock a file forever.
In the era of the floppy disk, your data was fragile. But there was a tiny sliding window on the corner of the disk. If you slid it one way, your data was read-only. It was the ultimate physical save button. If that tab was broken or moved, you could lose hours of work in a single overwrite error. The click of the floppy disk sliding into the drive, the grind sound of the head reading the magnetic tape, the feel of the sliding metal shutter. It was a physical relationship with data, something we've completely lost in the age of the cloud. The Write Protect tab vanished when the disk did, replaced by digital permissions and read-only boxes. We lost the physical lock on our information.
We didn't realize these things were leaving because they were replaced by something better. A phone book was replaced by a search engine, a map was replaced by a satellite, a VHS was replaced by a stream. But better often means frictionless, and friction is where memories are made. The weight of the phone book, the smell of the film canister, the tangibility of the map, these were the anchors that kept us grounded in our physical world. When we lose the objects, we lose the rituals. And when we lose the rituals, a little bit of the colour of our lives fades to grey.
But these objects aren't truly gone as long as we remember the clunk, the zip, and the pop. What is the one forgotten thing from your childhood that you can still smell or hear if you close your eyes? Was it the hum of a specific appliance? The texture of a certain toy? Tell me your most visceral, tactile memory in the comments. Let's rebuild the time capsule together.